With so many current scenes of distress in the world, the ones that shocked us to the core many years ago are all too easy to forget. In 1994, 800,000 Rwandans were killed in a tribal genocide that lasted less than 100 days. A group of young Scots is just back from Rwanda, and I imagine it'll be a long time before they forget what they've seen and heard. They're 5 Christians and 5 Muslims, and they went to Rwanda to see how interfaith peace and reconciliation efforts there are working out. The Peacebuilding Across Borders programme was created by the Church of Scotland and Interfaith Scotland. Joining us are 2 of the young people who travelled there, Gigha Lennox, a youth worker for the Church of Scotland in Edinburgh, and Junaid Ashraf, a Muslim student who's also Cumbernaul's youngest councillor. Also joining us is Mirella Yandole, the Church of Scotland's interfaith officer. Welcome to you all. Mirella, you organised the visit. You went out there with the group. What was the purpose of it and why Rwanda?
Hi there. Well, on my first day in the office, which was about a year ago, our Africa Secretary and I had a conversation about what we might learn from our international partners as a world church. And it immediately struck me as an opportunity to learn something very tangible from one of our partners called PROCMURA, which is the programme for Muslim and Christian relations in Africa. And I thought this would be a really good opportunity to bring five Muslims and 5 Christians to learn from our partner there. And immediately we knew we needed a hook for this, and that would be youth, with the idea of they would have a strong vision of what they wanted for Scotland, what they could learn from Rwanda, and what the young people in Rwanda could teach us.
And Rwanda, I mean, you were plunging there into a country that has got the most desperate, relatively recent history. Remind us, if you would, just what happened in 1994.
There were 2 major tribes in Rwanda, the Hutu and the Tutsis. The Hutu were the majority, and after Belgium left as an occupying power or a colonial power, the Hutu were in charge, and because the Tutsis had been the elite for so much of history, there was a real sense of a kind of a liberation force or a Hutu power movement for Hutu pride. And that escalated. I mean, it didn't start in 1994. It didn't come out of nowhere. There were periods of violence from the 50s onwards. But 1994 was very much a planned plot to rid the country of the Tutsi population and to have a revolution almost, because there weren't any other divisions in the country. There was the same language. There was pretty much the same religion, 60% Catholic. But it really escalated in 1994 into a planned genocide.
Gigha and Junaid, you arrived back in Scotland just on Thursday. I'm sure you're still trying to process it all. But I wonder what the thing is that stands out most from your week in Rwanda. Junaid first.
For me, it was learning about the recovery process for everyone there. I mean, for me, for something like that to happen, I would have assumed the country would have been civil war. I mean, 800,000 people killed within a 100-day period. And what was interesting about this is that for other genocides, sort of memorials and sort of history for other countries, is that it's generally like the government or the army doing this, but this wasn't that. These were neighbours killing each other. These were neighbourhoods. We've learned about, for example, godfathers killing their godchildren. It was extremely shocking. So we met with a group called the Light Group, which had perpetrators, so people who were killing, and victims of the genocide, and for them to say, we have God within our heart and we are here to forgive for the sake of our children, to empower our country to move on from this tragedy. What are the responses there? We were just completely shocked and silenced, and just there was a lot of thinking that went on. And during this week we were abroad.
And Gigha, is that what struck you too, that there was after this recovery at all?
Yes, definitely. I think what really struck me was the sense in the country of forgiveness, that strength that so many people in the country feel so strongly about their faith, and drive from that. On the Sunday morning, we had just come back from spending an evening with our host families in Rwanda, and we went to church on the Sunday morning, and we were there for a 3-hour service. 3-hour service, which is very unusual for us. But there was just such a sense of warmth, such a sense of faith in the place, and just it was overwhelming. It was overwhelming for us throughout our week, meeting real people, hearing about real stories, and it got a real sense of of the history, but then on the Sunday afternoon visiting the genocide memorial, it kind of went from two extremes, from this overwhelming sense of pride in their country and this overwhelming sense of warmth, to hearing about the history and learning more, and really truly remembering. It's a hard experience to explain.
And Junaid, that must have shaken you.
I mean, definitely for somebody who's very talkative. I mean, actually the whole group, we are very, very confident people and very, very sure of ourselves. And I mean, within the group, I mean, people were just heartbroken. I mean,
just describe to us what that Kigali monument is like.
As we said, about 800,000 people were killed during this genocide. At this memorial, which is the largest one they have, you couldn't recover full bodies. However, they've estimated that there are 259,000 bodies buried at this memorial that we went to. And at it, they've got other sort of exhibitions and things they are explaining about other genocides, such as, you know, the Holocaust and the Bosnian Srebrenica genocide. And it's very visual in some aspects of some parts of the museum. So in one area, they have a room just with pictures pinned up on the wall, just little clips, you can touch the pictures from people who've donated them from families, showing the people that they've lost. There was a section just for children, which is at the very, very end. It shows you a child's picture. I'll say their name, 7 years old, their favourite food, their best friend, what did they like to do. And then at the bottom it says how they were killed, and you got descriptions such as machete to the head. You had smashed on a wall. It was a very difficult experience.
And did you have the same sense as Gigha of extremes of emotional experience? Because I mean, I believe you missed Eid, for instance, with your family in Cumbernauld, but you celebrated it in Rwanda in what sounds like an absolutely spectacular way, from what I hear. I truly felt at home being in Rwanda. We went to the Eid prayer on Friday, and there was 20,000 people in the stadium. We had those 5 Muslims and 5 Christians that went, as you said, and the girls themselves, they all came in, and all the guys as well. They were truly welcomed into the stadium as well that we had prayed in, and it's so amazing sort of experience being there. I mean, the people themselves, they show no sign of having went through this just only 23 years ago. I mean, we met multiple people there who've both their parents were killed during the year they were born. They've never known their parents. I mean, if you didn't know any better, you would never know. This trip was sort of dual purpose in a way, because you were there to learn about Rwanda. You were also there to learn about yourselves and each other and each other's faiths. Was that something that did become important for you too?
As a Muslim living in Scotland, I don't think there's a great deal of sort of Christian. We're not taught a lot about the faith. We have the faith around us all the time. When we're young, we're at school, we learn about, you know, nativity plays, we learn about Jesus Christ, we learn about Christmas, we learn about Easter. But I mean, what does a practicing Christian actually do? I mean, what does a practicing Muslim actually do? So it was time for us to live with each other. For example, I was sharing a room with somebody who works as a youth worker with the youth within the Church of Scotland, and a trainee minister. So there was vast discussions that happened on all these like long trips that we had with each other. I mean, for myself, I guess I got to show to some people working within the Church of Scotland and other churches about what Muslims are really like. I mean, 5 times a prayer a day, what does that actually look like? What do Muslims do? Why do we believe in X, Y, and Z? And it was really good to see the cultural aspect as well, because whilst we were there, we were staying, for example, the Muslims stayed with the Muslim families for a day there, and the Christians stayed with Christian families for a day, just to see how our practices change in other countries. So it was very eye-opening for me about seeing how Muslims are acting within a country that's fairly similar to ours. There's about 3% Muslim population there. There's about 1.5% here in Scotland. It was eye-opening for me. I think the sort of integration and the sort of collaborations that they do with the churches, I think is something we can really learn here.
And Gigha, did you also find it an interesting learning experience in the same way?
Yeah, I definitely did. I find this was my first experience of interfaith dialogue in any way, and it really reiterated to me how important it is for our young people to have faith education, for our young people to learn about different religions, through asking questions, through learning, through experiencing something like this. For instance, us going to the Eid celebration and us going to experience and watch afternoon prayers in the mosque and meeting Muslim leaders. For me personally as a Christian, I feel it was an overwhelming experience, and I feel through this and through learning and the right education and different faiths and religions, we can truly build a true kind of knowledge and understanding and respect for those around us.
Mirella, it must be very heartening for you to hear how successful this has all been for your young people. The question does occur, why is it necessary to go all the way to Rwanda to learn these things, and whether this isn't something that faiths could be doing more of in Scotland?
Yeah, and that question was asked a lot in the planning process, and I had to really think about it myself to truly justify it. I mean, it's on a number of levels. One is that I run quite a lot of formal dialogues here in the UK, but spending a week together and building real friendships is so different from just sitting around a table or even over a cup of tea to ask why we do what we do and who we and how do we define who we are. So by being there for a whole week, living together, going through all the food poisonings and all sorts of things, that we all go through and getting to ask questions at really random times about the veil or the Trinity even, that just got asked on the bus, which is these are informal occasions where we get to ask deep questions. But also it was about that international relationship, and I think on another level it was about seeing what Rwandan Islam is like, what Rwandan Christianity is like, because here in the UK we hear about the Middle East and we hear about conflict and we hear about homegrown terrorism, and that didn't really come up at all. It was really about just an open chance to see what the faith was about rather than about the politics of things.
So finally, Gigha and Junaid, what do you feel you've brought back from Rwanda to Scotland that you can build on here?
Definitely a great example of what Christian-Muslim relations can get to. I think there's a tendency within perhaps the UK and perhaps like Europe that we have all the answers. But the relations that they had there were exceptional. One thing that the Mufti of Rwanda actually told us during one of our earlier meetings is saying that we understand that there's a lot of Islamophobia and racism and the rise of like right-wing extremist groups within, he said the West. He says, well, perhaps the lessons that we've learned within our country and from how we've reacted to what's happened to us, perhaps our lessons can be passed on to you and you can learn from us, which I thought was extremely heartening.
And Gigha?
As a church youth worker, and I work with young people in communities, I feel it's so hugely important teaching our young people about other faiths and allowing them to experience and have new experiences. A really important thing for young people is relationships, and it's not just relationships within our faith, it's relationships with other people.
That's a lovely thought to end on. Many thanks to you all for joining me, Gigha Lennox, Junaid Ashraf and Mirella Yandoli.